Okay, thanks so much, Meg, for the introduction. Hi, everybody. I'm Greg Albers. I'm at Getty and will be one of the presenters today. Let me get my slides up here for us. Okay, so we're going to be talking about Quire and IIIF, implementing a user-friendly workflow for digital publishing. Quire is our the digital publishing software that we've been building and using and working towards open sourcing at the Getty. And we've just recently integrated IIIF into it. So we wanted to share that all with you here in the community. Speaking today, there's a team of us here. Erin Cecile Dunigan, the Quire community manager, will be leading us off with a kind of introduction to Quire and to the use cases for IIIF in it. Again, I'm Greg Albers. I'm the digital publications manager at Getty, and I'll be talking about the user workflow for how IIIF works in Quire now. Matthew Hrudka, the software architect at Getty, is going to be talking about the technical details of the implementation. And Hannah Balenda, our software engineer, will be here available in chat and for the Q&A afterwards if you want to get into those technical details even more. So with that, I'm going to pass it off to Erin.
Awesome. Thanks, Greg. I guess next slide, please. Developed by Getty, Quire is a modern digital publishing tool that enables users to create scholarly, visually rich publications in a variety of formats. Quire is affordable, so no proprietary software or ongoing maintenance fees are required. It's richly featured. You can enhance publications with embedded audio, video, zooming images, and more. It's also customizable, so you can adapt Quire to your unique content with a wide range of custom features and styles. And it's also book-like. Quire comes with a built-in understanding of high-quality scholarly publishing, and it's accessible. We're targeting full WCAG 2.0 conformance. Above all, Quire was developed with the goal of making digital publications more discoverable and sustainable. Next slide. You can output Quire publications in a variety of formats, increasing distribution opportunities and publication discoverability. Ebook files are consumer ready for Amazon, Apple, and other vendors. PDF files are print on demand ready, and the online edition can be hosted on any web server. Next slide. Through the use of static site generation and a single set of human readable plain text files, Quire makes it possible to distribute and preserve content in a stable format. This ensures publication longevity and alleviates any concerns about broken website links or obsolete technology. Next slide. Here are some of Quire's key features and functionalities, including the recently added deep zooming capabilities with IIIF. Quire was originally developed as a solution to Getty's own digital publishing needs. But since it first launched in 2017, we've seen significant interest from other individuals and institutions in the arts and cultural heritage sector. To ensure Quire's longevity and ongoing use in the field, Getty decided to move Quire towards a community-supported model, with the goal of launching as fully open source by spring 2022. Next slide. As part of that process, we enabled beta access in 2018 and have since had over 250 people sign up to access Quire. These users can leverage the work Getty has done to create, customize, and distribute their publishing projects with Quire. We just ask that they don't redistribute Quire itself. In return, we look to this growing community of users to meaningfully contribute to Quire, or to Quire's growth and health as a publishing tool. Next slide. As we continue to develop and refine Quire's capabilities, there are a number of ways we encourage our community to get involved, including contributing to code, submitting bugs, adding to our documentation, or helping others in our user forum. And we welcome users from all levels of technical experience, from content creators to developers. We provide tools, resources, and support from both Getty staff and the community to make sure anyone using Quire feels comfortable with what they're doing. Next slide. So far, we've had more than 15 organizations and institutions publish over 25 Quire projects so far, and we have many more in the pipeline. Here you can see some of the institutions that have published with Quire so far. Next slide. Quire has been used to publish everything from collection and exhibition catalogs to journals, proceedings volumes, reports, online exhibitions, and even a personal family history. And you can see some examples of those publications here. They're also on the community showcase section of the Quire website. Next slide. Quire was designed specifically for scholarly, visually rich publishing. From the start, it was a no-brainer that IIIF was the way to go for several reasons. IIIF is rapidly becoming the preferred method for sharing high-resolution zooming images. It's an easier and more connected way of working, advancing critical scholarship among the growing number of institutions and museums using it. Getty is deeply involved in the adoption of IIIF and the creation of resources to support its use. And the fact that IIIF provides open access to rich image assets pairs perfectly with Quire's ethos of opening access to digital publishing technology. IIIF has been long awaited and one of the most frequently requested features from our community. In March 2021, Getty published our first official Quire publication to include IIIF processed images, which you can see here on the left. After extensive documentation, we were thrilled to finally announce the launch of IIIF compatibility to our community last month. So that is all from me. Over to you, Greg.
Great, thanks so much, Erin. So now I want to talk a little bit about the user workflow of how IIIF actually works for a Quire user in general. So Quire is built on a static site, around a static site generator, Hugo specifically. And if you're familiar with static site generators, typically the content and the data that you put into those is captured in Markdown for narrative, and then often a plain text data format, like in this case, YAML, for things like figure data. So for a basic Quire figure, we'd have data like this, where there's an ID, a source for the static image, an alt text for the description there, and the caption information. And this would be collected in the YAML file and then inserted into the Markdown file into a Quire chapter with a shortcode. So in this case, you can see here over on the left, there's a shortcode inserted in there. The Q figure shortcode is what we call it. It references that ID to the YAML, and then it will, as it renders the site, it will insert that image based on the source file, and the alt text and the caption will also be included inside in that text. Pretty simple. So for IIIF, we just sort of augmented that same workflow by adding into that into the YAML data, we added a media type to call out that it was a IIIF image. We add a IIIF attribute that is the path to an info.json file, and then an optional zoom max figure, so that it will determine how many levels of zoom we want that particular figure to show. By default, there's 6, but then you can have lower as well. And we also, at some point, we'll talk about wanting to implement even deeper levels of zoom, but we're just kind of starting out here based on what we needed for our first catalog that Erin had mentioned. So we have that explicit media type, we have that info.json file. In this case, it's an external info.json file. It's not something in the project itself, it's something we're referencing. And by adding that in, then that same short code is inserted in the Markdown. And when you open up into a figure, we get a nice big modal. And of course, you can zoom in deep into that image based on what's available in the IIIF info. So pretty straightforward way of really quickly adding in existing images, existing IIIF assets, if you've got them at your institution, or if you're looking at other institutions as well that you want to bring those into your Quire publication. All you need is that pathway. So it's a pretty simple approach for this first way of doing it. There's a couple of things that we're currently not making friendlier. We are requiring that media type. Technically, we could add logic in that says if there's a IIIF info.json thing provided, we can just make it in a IIIF image. But we use that media type in other areas for figure YAML. So we use the same kind of figure YAML structure for videos and audio figures and tables as well. And so we wanted to keep that consistent for users by making that explicit media type. We're not currently trying to use a static image provided from the IIIF server, so we still want Quire users to provide a static image, source image to use. That's what we use inline before they click open the figure modal. It's also what's used in Quire's other outputs. It's a multi-format system, so we're using the same assets, to output not only the website, the Quire Edition website, but also PDF and ebook. And for those, IIIF tiles aren't going to work, so we want to be using a static JPEG. So we're feeling like for now we're not trying to pull that from the server, and then we're also not parsing manifest JSON files. So those are, as you all know, manifest.json files are more commonly available for people if they're out looking for IIIF assets. They're going to come across those files first. But what we're looking for in what Quire needs is the info.json file inside that. So currently we're saying you need to find that info.json file, and we'll see how that works out. I think for users going forward, we're just early in the implementation days, and see if there is use in helping them with that a little bit more. For now, we're focusing on info.json because that's what we can produce in Quire for users who are trying to add assets that are not pre-existing, who they want to tile their own images for Quire. So for that, that's the sort of other option. So if there's not existing IIIF images out in the world that you want to use, you can take your own high resolution images as a Quire user and process them into IIIF. You add them into an image directory. You run Quire process --IIIF, and it will process those files in one at a time into tiles, and will also include the info.json file that can then be referenced in the YAML file. So this gives Quire users a variety of ways of adding IIIF assets into their project, whether it's through existing assets or through images that they're going to process. And Matthew will talk a little bit more about that processing system. So here we're just, instead of referring to an external URL, we're referring to the relative path to the one that was created in Quire. So lessons learned-ing, so these are ongoing. Right now, we found right away processing IIIF image files can take a long time. So as a sort of general user, we had a vision of being able to sort of, they just drop in their images, they type out the command, and they can, and voila, there's IIIF images. Of course, that could take quite a long time depending on the size and number of images. So we've been dealing with that with documentation, making it really clear to users what they're in for. And also we've implemented one at a time processing so that they're only processing one image at a time. So we're not trying to process all 10 images that they throw in that folder. Also, we found that proper preparation of source images can make a significant difference. Again, we were hoping the sort of vision was, drop in an image, run the command and walk away. But of course, if you have an image that's too large or it's not quite the right size, you can get a number of different, you can add a lot of time to the process, but also you can get some strange artifacts at the end. So we've documented that really well about how to best prepare your images for Quire processing. And then finally, static hosting the tiles within the project works. So you can, if you have a few IIIF images, you can keep them in that static folder, but only to a point. If there's too many of them, we found that computer and local preview and that kind of thing just don't work very well. So we're working on trying to talk more and learn more and understand more how users can host those static files that they've created in Quire elsewhere in sort of a separate server and then point to them with Quire. So that's a very quick run through on the sort of user workflow, and I'm going to turn it over to Matthew to talk more about the technical details behind all of that.
Thanks, Greg. Erin. So Quire has been in the hands of several developers over the years, including Greg Albers himself, who's done a lot of the development work. And so when I came to the Getty, this was one of the features that didn't exist in Quire, but it was clear that there was a need for it. And there had been some work done on deep zooming images, but not using the type of IIIF level 0 implementation to spec that the Getty is advocating for. So Quire itself is a series of commands that wrap other processes. And so looking at how to make Quire more usable for all levels, maybe even people who hadn't been using a command line before, it was really important that a feature like processing images that could have any number of things go wrong be implemented friendly and clear. So next slide. You can run Quire help and you see a number of commands. And each one of these commands is actually touching a different part of the code to handle just that concern, creating a new project, previewing that project, install, and then we get to process. And I think we came up with a pretty good path forward because processing might involve in the future other other levels of IIIF, other ways of passing flags to host those static assets elsewhere, read in that YAML configuration that Greg spoke about, and be able to do things like infer that, oh, this is a IIIF image, or it could be a IIIF image. Or if we go to the next slide, we can show a little GIF of what it is when you run that Quire process. So process is the command and IIIF is the flag. Again, we might actually do different types of processing. Right now, it's simply IIIF level 0, which means a set of static images are read, and it does not support a number of other features. And it was really important that we started to standardize the output so that people knew what was happening, because not everybody understands, what does it mean? Why do I have to process something? They might not even know that the process is in fact taking all of these images and slicing them into many other little images and storing them somewhere. And we needed to be able to get to a point that we could add progressive information of, now that you have these, or that it's going to take a very long time, go get coffee, or one of them failed, you'll have to do it again, or this is really large, please don't host these in your repository. You want to put them someplace else. All the mistakes we've sort of made along the way working with Quire at the Getty. So next slide shows a little bit in visual what I'm talking about, that each of these commands on the left when you run Quire at the CLI touches a different code module to run that process. In this case, we're actually using Go IIIF because Hugo is based on Golang. It fits in nicely, but also ensures that we can, in the future, if need be, replace the IIIF processing engine and all the dependencies for reading image files and slicing them up and creating the folder on the right with other things. So similarly, PDF and EPUB each uses a different module to call out to a service and produce those outputs. IIIF is very much like, in that way, architecturally, producing a PDF or producing an EPUB or a MOBI file. It takes the images as the input and runs it through a service to produce that output. Hopefully users never need to really think about the files on the right. They are the resolution and the XY of each of those individual tiles. And if you go to the next slide, it's simply to illustrate that all of those are then read by Leaflet. So Leaflet supports IIIF level 0. And that means it can read these static files, and it knows which files to load in to the same conceptually implementation for maps. When you look at a Google map or a Leaflet map, it's doing the same thing as it's doing here. It takes a number of tiles, map tiles or image tiles, and it puts them together to show the image here, the mountains, with, if you can see the small image on the upper left there, the zoom in, zoom out, and it will select a different file on the left from those statically hosted files. And they could be on an AWS server, it could be as part of the project in the repository or your local development machine. And we're working in our Quire cookbook, so to speak, of some suggestions for how to best do that. And also, as we've sometimes found out, not have a big bill for, let's say, Netlify hosting and bandwidth. It is a concern that IIIF image itself needs to be very large to start. And then we slice it into thousands. Hannah can jump in here at any time and correct me, but I think it ends up being thousands of images, image tiles. And they're all very small, but overall that pyramid of images of different sizing tiles can be quite large in terms of disk space. Next slide. So what happens when things go wrong? Because we found this out too, I'm sure you will. We're actively working to improve the messaging we give users. And that messaging needs to account for the fact that one of many images in a file might not have been processable as a IIIF image, a set of tiles. So we're trying to make sure that it's as clear as possible to users what the error was and maybe how to fix it. And that was a lot of the effort that we put into developing this part of Quire and kind of where we are now as a jumping off point. So next slide. We had some principles, and we used implementing the IIIF process feature in Quire as a way to push all of Quire commands forward and defining a consistent output format so that each Quire command will eventually share a consistent ethos or kind of format for communicating to users the command that is about to be run. So a good set of principles we decided was to repeat the command. Another was to describe the expected outcome, tell users what's going to happen. We're going to process all of these images, and this is where they'll be created. Display any caveats or warnings. I don't know if we ended up doing this, but it does in fact take a long time to process images. At one point, we were trying to process them in parallel, and most users' machines don't have the power to do that. So we are going to show, as we do in the GIF before, the image is in sequence being processed. Any caveats? One of the things is that you can run this command again and again and again. And as part of an architectural decision and a user decision, what happens if you run it? Do we throw away the previous run? Do we keep it? At the moment, we keep it. But we need to explain that to users. And then display that incremental process of what's actually happening once you hit the command to run. And at the end, summarize all of the results, success or failure. Success can be everything was fine, but failures, as you saw, should explicitly call out what file wasn't processable and maybe how to fix it. And next actions if it can't be fixed. So going forward, as we add to features such as static hosting or doing away with needing to specify the media type or more advanced features of annotation, anything like that, this is the starting point for making sure that that's as easy to use then as it is now.
Terrific. Thanks so much, Matthew. And thanks, Meg. I know we're at time and overtime now, but thanks so much.
Yeah, that's okay. Thank you all so much. We really appreciate it. It was a great presentation. I just want to encourage anyone, if there's one question, if folks want to follow up, you can go to the community section on Whova and post a discussion there, or you have the ability to directly message people. If you go to the attendees list, you can send them a note. So if anyone has any outstanding questions, feel free to carry them on after the session after that. So thanks again to everyone. It was a great presentation, and we will see you all at the next session.
Thanks so much, everyone.
Bye all.
Thank you.